Story 1. I taught a freshman history class that included a student who was actually a junior because he had been failing and had to repeat classes. He was often using drugs, paid little attention, and spent time with other disengaged students. He was on track to fail again. The school therapist and I made it our mission to turn him around. She arranged drug counseling, I tutored him to help him pass his classes, and we both spoke with the lacrosse coach and worked to get him on the team so he would have structure and a better group of friends. He completely turned things around, graduated, and wrote me a great thank you note that I still have. I recently ran into him in the town where I teach, and he is doing well in college now. I am proud of him for taking the steps to avoid the path he seemed headed for. Story 2. I am the student a teacher told to my face would amount to nothing. I have to hand it to him because he was very astute. Story 3. He was on trial for murder when he was in my class, which may have colored my perception of him. Story 4. I was the opposite. Many teachers believed I would be an overachiever who could do anything in academia. For them, that meant no more effort was needed. I believed them, aimed high, and failed on many occasions. Knowing a lot as a child and being well-behaved is not enough to succeed as an adult. I never learned to handle real challenges because there were none in school. I struggled in college and white-collar work because I never learned how to focus and solve problems in those settings. It took me 10 years after leaving school to understand this and to unlearn the false expectations they had drilled into me. I am now doing much better and am content to be a regular person who contributes on a small scale. Story 5. This is not about me, but I used to have a classmate who constantly got into trouble. Every teacher hated him and dreaded having him in their classes. Recently, he appeared in my Facebook suggestions. He has a wife and a baby. He looks very happy, and I hope he is doing well. Story 6. 2 that stand out. I had a student in my 3rd grade class. He was tiny and physically adorable and was constantly in trouble. I knew he would have a rough life because his family never set limits or held him accountable. I was the liar, never him. He had a true baby boy syndrome. I tried so hard to make the parents understand how they were harming him even though they loved him so much. I was so sad when he was murdered at age 14 by his 2 friends after the trio robbed a gas station and fought over the money they had stolen. Another student was a girl who looked older than most children that age. She was funny, smart, and a real joy to teach. Her period started that year, and instead of feeling embarrassed by the mess, she was so happy because her mother said now she could have babies. She became pregnant in 4th grade, had her first child in 5th grade, and before high school she had a total of 4 children and then dropped out. It broke my heart. My coworker called one day to tell me she had caught her in a park with a military man who was shocked when told she was in elementary school. Story 7. There was a kid named Shane who went to school with me all 12 years. He was a burnout or a white trash kid. He constantly got in trouble in elementary school and later got into drugs and fights in high school. All that said, he was always very nice to me. I was a nerd, and in 6th grade I picked Shane to be my partner for a project because we had to pick someone we were not friends with. I think it meant a lot to him to be picked by a smart kid, and we did really well on that project. I also learned a lot about him. His stepfather was a real piece of shit. I know he was beating Shane and his mother. There was also a time in 10th grade English when he was really being a jerk, and after class I stopped him in the hallway and asked if he needed a hug. He looked at me like I had offered him a kidney. I did not actually think he would hug me, but he did, and I hugged back for a long time. I truly do not think anyone had ever hugged him before. The year after we graduated high school, Shane committed suicide. I know a lot of people in our class thought he was mean, and the teachers were irritated with how he acted out, but he lived in a horror movie, and any basic gesture of kindness could have reminded him that his life mattered. Story 8. Back when I worked at a particular accounting firm, my former teacher, who disliked me, applied for an entry-level position. When she discovered I was interviewing her, she stood up and left while giving me a stink eye. If I had known this would get so much attention, I would have posted a more detailed story. Story 9. I was not a teacher, but this boy entered my 3rd grade class to the distress of that year's teacher. She told us to ignore his antics and not to encourage him if he acted up. She also said she had fought to keep him out of her class and out of the school system entirely. She had taught him through third grade 3 times, and this would be the fourth. She was less concerned about his academic ability than about the safety of the other students. She seemed to believe his presence was a threat and had a strong antipathy toward him. I do not remember any major incidents with him, and I do not think he treated me particularly badly, which was unusual because I was often picked on as a child. I recall he attended special education classes, and it seemed he got into trouble and was ultimately expelled, possibly for a sexual offense against another student. I am not sure of the details. The teacher had suggested many rumors, and I may be misremembering. A few years ago I searched for him online, hoping he had grown up and become successful. I tried 1 or 2 variations of his name before finding a newspaper headline. He had killed his best friend and cousin by stabbing him through the heart during a fight over a girl. He had been dating the girl. When she broke up with him, he would not leave her alone. His cousin and another friend tried to stop him from assaulting her when she arrived. He flew into a rage and stabbed both of them, killing his best friend and cousin and wounding the other friend. The girl was unharmed. He stabbed his best friend 8 times, the fatal wound to the heart, and stabbed the other friend 3 or 4 times as he ran away. The judge who presided over his trial and appeals described it as a vicious killing, and the jury that sentenced him cited his lack of remorse as an aggravating factor. He accepted a plea deal that resulted in life in prison rather than the death penalty. Reports said he was heavily under the influence of drugs at the time. A very sad story, an unfortunate end for the boy who had unnerved my third-grade teacher, and even more so for his best friend. Story 10. I am a teacher who teaches adults who, for various reasons, need to redo parts of high school. I have seen so many broken people put down by teachers when they were younger. They were told they could never do well in school, they should not even bother trying, and they would never get their dream jobs. What a way to ruin lives. The vast majority of them can succeed in school with the right help. It is a wonder to see someone regain their self-esteem and realize they are fully capable. Many of my former students have gone on to achieve their dream jobs. I wish more teachers who work with children and young adults would stop predicting their students' futures and instead teach in the ways their students learn. Story 11. When I asked a question in class, one of my microbiology professors got so offended that he told a lecture hall of more than 500 students that he hoped nobody would be misguided like me and that I would not get anywhere in life, especially never into medicine in the pre-med class. He went on for at least a minute about how awful I was to the whole class, which shocked them. There was dead silence after he returned to lecturing. For the record, it was only a question about something he taught that conflicted with another point he had made. I was not trying to be rude. I simply did not understand. I had never asked him questions or interacted with him in person before this incident. I did get into medicine and later married a wonderful husband. His best friend, a woman, is married to that professor's son. I met the professor at his son's wedding as my husband's guest. Somehow the topic of students who had taken his class came up. Of course, he did not remember me, and I had no intention of bringing up the incident. By then I would be considered very successful, even for a doctor. He turned to his son and said that, of course, he knew his students would all turn out well. It was an awkward reception for me. I told my husband afterward and asked him to keep it to himself. I am still amused. Story 12. She was also my niece by marriage, and her mother was murdered a couple of years ago. I tried for years to show her that there were better options and that she could be more. In middle school, she told me she wanted to spend as much time locked up in the juvenile center as possible and to be a crack cocaine user and sex worker when she grew up. She is a methamphetamine addict with a violent rapist for a boyfriend. I think she lives in a dilapidated mobile home. The only time I have seen her since the murder was when she was wandering the streets, angry that everyone in the family refused to help her. Before her, I thought every child could be helped. Between her and a few other kids I have known since, I am not so sure anymore. Story 13. Not a teacher, but my mom. I read a bunch of books on serial killers when I was in high school. Forensics was really interesting to me, so I read a lot about the serial killers who have been in the area. My mom said, either you'll become a police officer or a serial killer, which is a bit much, looking back. It turns out being a serial killer pays way better than law enforcement. I'm just kidding. I became an evidence technician, so I get to yell at police officers a lot. Story 14. My mom and I went on a walk and she was lamenting that she had been a bad mother while raising us. A bit of background. She and my dad divorced in 1966 when I was 3. She raised 3 children on a secretary's salary. My dad left the state to avoid paying child support, and she did not have a close relationship with her parents, who lived far away. On this walk, I listened to how badly she felt and I stopped her, telling her that she had raised 3 successful children. We were all happily married and employed. None of us ever asked her for money, we each owned our homes, none of us had substance abuse problems, and none of us had been in jail. I turned to her and said, I think you raised 3 successful adults and did a fantastic job. She had never seen it that way, and I think it made her feel better. Story 15. I do not believe any student is destined to get nowhere in life. They may need a different outlet or an opportunity to pursue something they are passionate about beyond the academic world. Many have found what they were seeking and achieved success. Others have not yet discovered it and still struggle. I wish them the very best regardless of their performance in school. Story 16. I have a couple of examples. To be clear, I have never told a student they will not accomplish anything, but I do give them pep talks when they really do not care about things. It is more of a do not throw away your opportunities and your talent. Care about something and work hard type of thing. I had a couple of brothers who really did not put effort into school. The family was well off, so they did not care. Both were very smart but did not care. The older one was about to leave for a very good high school, but could not be bothered to do the work. Once, when he failed my class, I was mad because he was also unruly, and I told him that he had so much potential that it pained me that he threw it all away. He got mad and told me not to speak to him ever again. I apologized the next day and we made peace. To add context, we had already talked to the parents and asked for the boys to be taken for an evaluation to better serve them, but the parents never did. They had a lot of money, but they were not very good parents. They often forgot to pick up the kids. Anyway, he graduated and we were on good terms. We received sporadic updates and found out that neither he nor his brother finished high school. The younger one almost killed his girlfriend in a car crash because he was underage, driving without a license. None of them are doing anything with their lives, and their parents are not that well off now because that stunt set them back a lot. The car was totaled, insurance did not pay because he was underage, and they had to pay for all the medical bills for the girlfriend and him. I do not remember well, but I think the girlfriend sustained a severe scalp injury in the incident. She did not die, but you can imagine. I always wonder if he remembers we talked and I was trying to help him be a better student. I bumped into him last year and he greeted me very warmly. I hope he gets his act together. Another one, more recently. He is a great kid with obvious attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So he is a mess at school, but he is so good and kind. The problem is his family. They are in a shady business and one of his brothers was killed. His friends know about his family's shenanigans, so some of them do not go to his house. We know that as soon as he graduates, he will get into the business. No one has said it to him, but we have talked about how afraid we are when he leaves. We are afraid we will hear the news of his passing. It is a shame because he is such a great kid. But we know the pull of his environment is too strong. Story 17. I have 2 degrees. If I could go back in time, I would have become a carpenter. Story 18. When my wife was in school, she was told that because of her brain damage, she would not make it to college in the United Kingdom. She attended college and university and earned a master's degree. She is now a teacher and would never tell a student what they cannot achieve. I am so proud. Story 19. A professor I had in college about 20 years ago was from a small town in West Virginia. He said there were few options. You either joined the military, went to jail, worked a terrible job, or were one of the 3 kids who went to college. The army would land a helicopter on kids' yards, fly them around town, and sign them up upon landing. Several teachers told him he would never amount to anything. Only one told him to get his act together. He took an intelligence quotient test, and it came back that he had an intellectual disability. He noticed that on this version of the test some questions were simply whether you knew a word in French. So he studied French, took the test again, and scored in the genius range. They thought he had cheated, so they made him take it a third time with the principal watching. He scored even higher. He made copies of each of his degrees and sent them to the teacher who had said he would never amount to anything, writing ha 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 on each one. Story 20. I am the student who was told by my terrible teacher that my speaking English would be a detriment to my life in the Philippines, and that I would not be able to find jobs or interact well with proper members of society. I moved to the United States in 2013. Laugh out loud. My basic-ass job pays me more every month than she would ever make in a year. Story 21. He ended up having an affair with my wife a decade later. Story 22. My guidance counselor often talked down to me and was condescending because of my grades in high school. He tried to talk me out of college. I graduated from a great school with excellent grades, and I work in the medical field now. He did not know that my life at home was stunting my ability to succeed. Story 23. A teacher told me I wasn't cut out for higher learning. It was a 7th grade honors course. I now have a master's degree and work as a mental health therapist because it matters. Story 24. I never believed that of any student. Why would I? I am only a stepping stone on their path. I would not presume they cannot create a future for themselves. I have never thought of any student as anything but a budding adult on the path to creating their lives. Story 25. I have been wrong a few times. I wish I were wrong more often. Story 26. I think I was one of the most hated students at my school. In 6th grade, I went through the most horrific phase of my life. I was self-harming and was not doing well academically. I was severely depressed and had to go to therapy to function normally. My teachers were one of the reasons I almost never wanted to go back. They spread stories about my self-harm and slut-shamed a 12-year-old who had been sexually assaulted. During 7th through 9th grade, I felt extremely alone and did not have many friends. None of the teachers thought I could ever do well. They called me a problematic child, an attention seeker, and other names to make things worse. They had absolutely no faith in me. If it had not been for one English teacher, I would have seriously considered switching schools. She helped me with my self-esteem and shared her own experiences. She motivated me to pursue public speaking, debates, and model United Nations conferences. I don't know if I should name her, but she is a remarkable person. She was probably the only one who supported my decision to move to Delhi for my 11th and 12th grades, while the other teachers would pounce on me and guilt-trip me into staying. When I reached 10th grade, I just wanted her and my mother to be proud of me. I put my heart and soul into my studies and secured 95% in my 10th board exams, earning a seat in one of India's premier schools with a merit scholarship. Recently, I scored 96.75%, achieving the highest all-India marks in economics and political science in my 12th board exams. I went back to my old school, and it was oddly satisfying to prove wrong the teachers who had given up on me when I needed them. It was the sweetest revenge for me. Story 27. Not just my teachers, but also my psychiatrist told my mom it would be better for me to study something light that was not scientific or mathematical, perhaps something in the arts, because I had an intelligence quotient just above that of an average child with Down syndrome. 16 years later, I am pursuing a Doctor of Philosophy in experimental cancer therapeutics, with a background in genetics, biological data science, and mathematical biology. I also paint. Story 28. At the General Certificate of Secondary Education level in the United Kingdom, I was told and made to feel this a lot by many teachers and family. I had many counseling sessions at school with my mom about why my grades were so low. On results day, I had done very poorly but just well enough to get into college if I retook the basic mathematics, English, and science General Certificate of Secondary Education exams at college. I did that and again did poorly. After that, I kind of gave up and started a minimum wage 9-to-5 job at a supermarket. To be honest, I had fun with my life. After 2 to 3 years, a colleague at work asked why I did not have plans to go to university and said I was clearly intelligent. At that point, I decided to go back to college. I discovered business and technology education council qualifications and found they suited my way of learning. I achieved the highest possible grades for that level, got into university, enjoyed 4 great years, met my now wife, was diagnosed with developmental coordination disorder, earned an upper second-class honors degree, and now have a very well-paid job. Story 29. Dear Mrs. Roberson, you were my sixth grade teacher who told my mother in 1996 that I would never amount to anything. Fuck you. I am a woman and had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I have a Master of Business Administration degree and earn a six-figure salary. You are a heinous person who gave me a D in every class and set me up for failure, but my mother did not believe you. Story 30. I once had a teacher who hated me. I am not sure why. I can only think it was because it was a private school and we were not nearly as wealthy as the other families. She was the only teacher I had throughout my school life who consistently gave me bad marks, punished me, and told me I would never amount to anything. I distinctly remember her making me stand at the front of the class to apologize for being a selfish individual at Christmas for not doing cards, when I had written one to every pupil and to her. I was 7. Now I enjoy my career. It does not make a lot of money, but it is something I enjoy, and I am able to do freelance writing in my spare time, which was always a lifelong dream. I own my house. I have a wonderful husband, and we are expecting our first child. So I consider myself to be winning in life. Screw you, Mrs. Gravette. You miserable asshole. Story 31. I was that student. I was told hospitality was my only career option. I have a master's degree, fully own one company, and am a partner in a second startup. The teacher was fired. Story 32. I am not a teacher, but I can speak from personal experience. I was strongly advised to drop out of high school and attend a trade school because I did the bare minimum and disliked mathematics at a science and mathematics-focused school. I earned a master's degree in design engineering and now design products that are probably used by my former teachers. Story 33. On my last day of school, a teacher walking past my classroom popped her head in and shouted that I would never amount to anything in life. I wasn't even a bad kid. I just had an accent she didn't like. I had moved from a rough school to a posh one where people spoke more formally than I did. I worked hard after leaving school and eventually earned a master's degree, but I never understood what I had done to give that impression to her, apart from the fact that she was a raging snob. Story 34. I had a real problem in middle and high school after my dad died of cancer 2 weeks before my 13th birthday, and I struggled with apathy and depression, on top of what was later diagnosed as autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. A teacher once told me I did not have the work ethic to accomplish anything in life because I could not bring myself to do anything I did not like, so I would be unemployed and on welfare. Almost 20 years later, after the help of some incredibly supportive college professors and a good therapist, I am working on my doctorate in a field I have always been passionate about. I became my master's program's first endowed graduate assistant due to my almost obsessive work ethic. I have published 2 scholarly peer-reviewed articles, traveled and presented my original research at 3 professional conferences, and befriended some of the leading figures in my field whom I grew up venerating. I have written a book that has sold more than 1,000 copies and is about to be released in paperback later this year, meaning the publisher expects sales to continue. My book was a finalist for several distinguished awards in my field. I am working on my second book alongside my dissertation. I served on the screening committee of a film festival eligible for the Academy Awards, helping to choose the films that the festival would show in competition. I am teaching classes. I testified before the state legislature in opposition to bills targeting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and other sexual and gender minority children. I am helping to organize a union of doctoral students on my campus. I have been a commentator on a regional Emmy-nominated documentary series. I have given half a dozen podcast interviews and a couple dozen paid public lectures. But the sweetest moment for me was being invited to be my hometown's keynote speaker for the Memorial Day ceremony at the cemetery last year, and seeing that teacher be forced to introduce me and list those accomplishments. Story 35. My oldest former students are 20 or 21 years old. It is hard to predict how they will turn out because they are still young. Some are struggling with partying and addiction, housing instability, legal problems, and finding employment. Others have found work in manual labor or have joined the armed forces. Story 36. I have been a teacher for 25 years. The students who always messed around did the best in life. The ones who were cruel and aggressive had the worst lives. It is the personality traits I look for, not grades. I still have students who follow me on Facebook. Story 37. For one, I have never told the student I thought they would not get anywhere. I have always hoped my students would do well. However, I had a very problematic student who was disruptive, rude, did not do much in class, and harmed the other students by taking so much attention from his teachers, me included. I invested a lot of time in him and he did improve, but he was not my only student, and I dislike when students who attend class and do what is expected get ignored because they are not causing a scene every day. I realized I was not giving enough attention to the rest of the class. So I reduced the amount of hand-holding and provided more scaffolding. He seemed to do okay with this and I was hopeful he would be all right. He is in prison for murder now. Story 38. I thought most of my loud students would be fine once they entered the workforce, and most were. One student said he had been bullied, but other students said he was strange and antagonized them. I had an uneasy feeling about him. He was later charged with the rape and murder of a younger boy. I also had a student in my class whom I disliked. He was popular, but I did not like him. He picked on me because I refused to flatter him. He was later charged with rape and attempted murder. Everyone was shocked. I was not. Story 39. I never said anything like that to a student or a parent. I am not a prophet, and I know academic achievement does not always equal a good life. The only time I tried to temper some parents' aspirations for their child was when I was a special education teacher. The child had Down syndrome. He was nonverbal and had difficulty regulating his emotional responses. His parents wanted him to go to middle school in a special education class. I knew that school. There was little to no inclusion. The students in that class were ostracized by others, and I knew that my sweet student would have a hard time adjusting. It damaged my relationship with the parents beyond repair. They wanted so much for their child to have a normal life. Several years later, I saw the student at a library. He was with a group of young adults from a residential care home. I do not know the exact English term. I suppose middle school had not gone well. In hindsight, I should have tried to help them with their plan instead of saying the student could not do it. The result might have been the same, but it would not have caused them pain, and perhaps I would have been able to prepare them. Story 40. A teacher in England told a student they would never amount to anything. The student now owns the biggest chain of pubs in the United Kingdom and named the chain after the teacher. What a dramatic reversal. Story 41. I am not a teacher but a student. Something was off about the school I went to. All the burnout students were just poor and did not have time to do homework, and now they are business owners, mostly in blue-collar work but earning good money. The incredibly smart and popular kids all own homes now but are working soulless jobs and cannot maintain healthy relationships. Many of the popular women now work in pornography and on OnlyFans. Theater students have gone on to make music, some successfully, and some still perform in plays. The jocks are still involved in sports and are either playing professionally, coaching, or working as personal trainers. Hardly any of these people have gone to jail, other than a few convictions for driving under the influence. However, there is a group of people who absolutely blew my mind. A larger number of students from my old school who got good grades but were not active in any particular group have been involved with child sexual abuse material or related offenses and are currently serving time. What made it weirder was that these kids got good grades and were usually among the more wealthy students. It sounds like something someone ranting on Instagram or TikTok would say, but it has been in my local news lately. It is kind of freaking me out, frankly. Some teachers commented on the town's Facebook page, saying things like, "I always knew he would turn out like that," about one particular man, and it spooked me because there were no obvious signs. He got good grades, showed up to class every day, was smart, and knew how to talk to people, but no one wanted to be his friend. No one had a good reason why either. It was just an atmosphere. Story 42. Probably one for Ripley's, but I used to teach incarcerated youth, so the relationship already begins where you hope they are at their lowest point, and statistically, you are probably wrong in that hope. I truly enjoyed working with those students and had more success stories than not. I still believe all students can improve despite their circumstances. One particular student never did anything he was asked to do. He would make fun of other students who listened. He was constantly standing and walking around the classroom, and he tagged the walls and desks. We would send him to psychiatric services, social services, legal, nursing, and so on whenever we could, but anytime he was in the classroom, it was a harder period. The average seat time for students before adjudication when I was there was 17 days, and after adjudication maybe 2 months. I do not recall how long I had this student, but I remember getting more serious with him than I would with most students. I had a short stint as a public defender and could paint a pretty vivid picture of potential futures for these young men and women. I spoke somewhat harshly to him about what lay in store if he did not invest more in himself. A year or less after I had this student, I was getting off at a subway station that had delayed service because someone had fallen on the tracks. I smelled burning human flesh and thought, terrible way to go. A day or so later, a colleague sent a text and asked if I had heard what happened to our troublesome student. No, what? He died. How? He ripped off a kiosk and was running from police, tried to cross the tracks, and hit the third rail. Killed him instantly. Ah. It was near where you live, so I figured you might have already heard. Thanks for letting me know. I checked the news and my text messages. My troublesome student was the electrocuted body I had smelled. Sad case all around. Story 43. I ended up in juvenile detention for grand theft auto a month after 8th grade graduation. Story 44. I had a teacher who recommended I be in remedial classes despite getting a B average, saying I would fail in advanced classes in high school. I took advanced classes anyway, and I am glad I did because they challenged me. It turns out I did not do well in her class because I was not challenged. I changed high schools my senior year and the classes were a joke compared to my previous high school, so I coasted and started an entry-level government job right out of high school. I have been a federal employee ever since, moving up every few years. I am not wealthy, but I am comfortable, and I will be retired 10 years younger than she was when she made her comments to me. Thanks for the motivation. Story 45. He murdered someone. There was a manhunt for him. So I was right. We have had several students go to jail. A colleague I taught with keeps me updated about cases he sees on Facebook. It is sad because part of me feels vindicated for how I felt. No teacher wants to feel that way toward a student. We do not want to see the worst for them, but when it happens I feel relieved, like I was not a monster for feeling that way. Story 46. I taught an 8th grade student who was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. The diagnosis is often used as a catch-all for dangerous, disrespectful, or violent behavior. In 8 years of teaching, I encountered only one student like that. School administrators used his diagnosis to let him get away with everything. He groped girls. He pretended to masturbate in class. He continuously swore at people. He dropped his pants and pretended to urinate on someone. He was never disciplined because of his disorder. His mother backed him up every time and was his #1 supporter. In high school, he began assaulting his mother. Suddenly, she was no longer in his corner. She kicked him out and he ended up in jail. I always wonder, if anyone had ever held him accountable, would he have had a chance? Story 47. I had a middle school math teacher who said everyone in the class was terrible at math, and that if none of us failed the final exam, a standardized test, he would personally pick us up from our houses and drive us to the amusement park. In my defense, I failed the writing section, which is ironic because writing is my favorite and math is the bane of my existence. Anyway, I just got accepted into a game design major, even though he explicitly said he believed none of us would ever do anything with our lives. I think he said that to other students too. But I was quiet when I was stuck in class and then went home to ask my mom for help. He was a pretty nasty person. My mom was part of the Parent-Teacher Association for a few years, and he was equally demeaning toward the parents. I'm amazed he never got fired. Story 48. The last school I attended was for all the children who were in care in the area where I lived. All of the kids in the class, except for me, ended up in prison for one thing or another. The least serious offense I know of involved a young man who used drugs. I keep tabs on him because he was genuinely nice and one day he may be okay. The most serious crime was committed by someone I used to sit next to every day. He raped and murdered a little child. He is surprisingly not in prison now and has gone on to have 8 children, 7 girls and 1 boy. I keep tabs on him for obvious reasons and I believe he will offend again. I was told many times that I would be like the other boys I went to school with. I am proud to say I have never been to prison. The last time I was arrested was when I was 14 for assault in self-defense. I have a stable career and 3 children, and soon I will be a grandfather. Moving out of the area I am originally from also helped. Story 49. I am not a teacher, but I feel this should be said. In 3rd grade I had a teacher who despised me. I have no idea why. I was not poorly behaved. One afternoon another student and I were the last 2 in the room. She told him he needed to work harder and pay more attention, or he would grow up to be a loser like me. Later she moved grades, and in 6th grade I had her again. I was standing in the lunch line when a boy jokingly pushed me. I pushed back as a joke, and she tried to have only me expelled. She moved grades again. In 9th grade my girlfriend was in her class. Somehow the teacher found out we were dating and told my girlfriend to stay away from me because I was the type of person who would get her pregnant and leave her. I never did anything to her. She destroyed my self-confidence throughout my school years. Now I am not a deadbeat dad. I love my child. I did not go to college, but I make a decent living and have been married to the same woman for more than 20 years. I did not turn out the way she expected, and I bet many others did not either. A teacher's attitude towards students can have a profound effect on them. Story 50. I am not a teacher, but my primary school principal told my parents not to expect much from me academically when I was 7 or 8 years old. I had undiagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There were suspicions of Tourette syndrome, but it turned out to be the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I also had a learning disability related to the undiagnosed condition. From that principal's perspective, I would not be able to go far academically. After seeing many specialists and trying several medications for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, after years of struggling to find effective study methods and after several years of changing my college path, I finally graduated from university with a bachelor's degree in animation specializing in 3D art. Overall, I completed 3 years of study in graphic design, 2 years of general studies to raise my grade point average to university entrance level, 3 years of visual arts to build a strong portfolio, and 3 years at university. Story 51. I was the kid teachers hated. One even called me a waste of taxpayer dollars and oxygen to my face. I dropped out in my sophomore year and started working as a welder's assistant at a small shop near my parents' house. I earned my general educational development certificate a few years later. I earned an associate's degree and now work as an electronics technician. I am going back for my bachelor's degree in engineering. I have a house, a wonderful partner, a silly cat, and a pretty good life. Story 52. When we were little, my brother's kindergarten teacher told my mother that he would never amount to anything and needed special education because she thought he was too dumb for regular classes. This was the early 1990s and the teacher was older, so I was not surprised she said that to my mother. My brother struggled through school because he did very little of the work. As an adult, we learned he had been extremely bored throughout school and had autism spectrum disorder that was never diagnosed. Now he has a master's degree in psychology and plans to continue on to a Doctor of Philosophy degree. He currently works for the local mental health services agency, helping children and people in need obtain the mental health services they require. Story 53. My 12th grade English teacher told me I would be nothing in life. 8 years later, I am taking her to the hospital while she is on a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric hold. Story 54. I worked at a school serving students from very low socioeconomic backgrounds right after college. I had many great students, but there were a handful I simply could not reach. One 6th grader was notorious on our campus. He was in my class, incredibly bright, and we had a decent relationship. I could tell he stood no chance. He told me that he and his father would trash hotel rooms and other property for fun. Every other word out of his mouth was fuck or the N-word. He never lashed out at me, but I would see referrals where he had thrown desks and threatened to hit teachers. He was in and out of the alternative campus constantly. The summer after his 8th grade year, he passed away. The circumstances were not released other than that it was some sort of incident. A few years later, I had another student who seemed to be struggling outside the band hall, but he loved the saxophone and took great pride in his musicianship. He was murdered at his apartment when he was 15 or 16. I would not have been surprised if he had joined a gang after middle school. I did not see that coming. It was really heavy. Rest easy, DeMarcus and Juan. Story 55. It was the other way around. Several teachers repeatedly told me I would get nowhere. I decided to enroll in a teacher's academy and earn a teaching degree. During an internship, I returned to my old school to tell them they were right, that anyone could get a teaching degree. I never became a teacher. Instead, I developed a career in information technology. The revenge was fun, and it turned out that you did not need a degree in computer science to become a decent developer. A degree in mathematics was perfectly fine. Story 56. I was right. He was in my class as a 7th grader but attended only a handful of times. When he was 15, he was shot and killed at 2 a.m. on a school night while running with gang members. The local news covered the shooting and interviewed several friends who said he was the smartest and kindest person they knew. I wish they had interviewed me. He could not read and did not know basic math. He once threw a desk at me and beat up another teacher. The boy's mother, the woman who let her son skip school 90% of the time, never returned calls from the school, did not show up when he was in trouble, and let him roam at 2 a.m. on a school night, was screaming that the world had taken her angel. Story 57. I'm a teacher. The only students I've ever had this kind of mentality about were the extremely violent students with severe mental illness. In my 12-year career, I've seen about 10 of these types, and to my knowledge, every single one is either dead or in jail for murder, rape, or theft. When you are exposed to hundreds of young people every year, it is not difficult to spot the true psychopaths who have no redeeming qualities and will only cause violence toward others. Fortunately, they amount to about 0.5% of the total population. Story 58. I had a student last year whom I absolutely hated. I can usually find one redeeming quality in all my students, but everything this student did rubbed me the wrong way. I still treated him cordially, but I could not stand him. He is in jail for murder. Story 59. I am not a teacher, but I did not end up where my chemistry teacher said I would. She said I was stupid and that I would never make it in life or that I would be a lifelong failure. I got into university, graduated, got a job as a car salesman, and was promoted to dealership manager. I bought a second Mercedes. I am currently working on obtaining my information technology certifications because I want a job that allows me to work from home. I am also working on starting a small business with my best friend. She was not right about me. Not knowing every acid and how it reacts with random things does not make you a failure. Story 60. I always love telling this one. It is not my story, but my brother's. My brother was not a great student. He was not a bad person. He just hated school, misbehaved, was frequently in detention, and received poor grades. One teacher who disliked him said to him, "You are never going anywhere in life." Since leaving school, he became extremely successful. Many years later, the school invited him to speak. The same teacher was still working there. After mentioning his success, he concluded, "Never let anyone tell you that you are not good enough or cannot go anywhere. That teacher said that to me when I was your age, but look where I have got to today." She approached him after his speech and said, "That was not necessary." He replied, "No, what you said to me was not necessary." Story 61. There were some kids I went to high school with who I thought were complete dirtbags. A couple of them seemed to have improved as adults, but most are either still hanging around my small town looking like dirtbags or have died of heroin overdoses. Story 62. I am not a teacher, but I had a great English teacher in high school who addressed this with our whole class. He was about to pass back a paper we had written when he paused and said, "I don't want any of you to be discouraged by your grades. Not just in my class, but in any class. Some people are meant to live a good life digging ditches, surrounded by friends and family who love and support them. Others are meant to be successful lawyers who marry beautiful spouses, have children they never see until they retire, and then spend their money trying to buy love and status. Live the life you want, not the life your grades say you can have. Apparently, there were a lot of ditch diggers in my class. Story 63. One of the students who caused the most problems at a school where I taught, constantly skipping classes, swearing at teachers, and missing assessments, is now studying to be a teacher. Story 64. I was homeschooled until 7th grade, so I did not have any friends when I started public school, and I was very shy. One popular classmate was the class clown and seemed involved in gang activity in our large inner-city school district. He was the first to go out of his way to talk to me, call me his friend, and introduce me to other kids. Because of him, I tried out for the track team that year, and we were team captains together the following year. I remember waiting for a bus with him after practice when he opened up about his family and said he could not wait for high school because he would be old enough to get a job and go live with his uncle, and that we would be at the same school again. One day in social studies, he was particularly disruptive, and our teacher warned him that if he continued on that path, he would drop out of school, end up in jail, or worse. That summer before our freshman year, he was shot and killed by one of our classmates. That was about 20 years ago, but I still think about him from time to time. His friendship meant a lot. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.